Are you serious? Love your enemies? Do good to them and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be the sons of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Note the importance of showing kindness to people who don't deserve it. Aren't you glad God showed kindness to you when you didn't deserve it? So how do we express kindness? In probably 1,000 little ways. But it's going to cost us something. It's going to cost us our time, our convenience, our effort, our strength, our energy. You could visit the sick, elderly, and lonely. You could call the discouraged. You could do a favor for someone. Run errands, bear burdens, share joys and sorrows. Encourage the downhearted. I need to stop right there. When we were trying to grow this church initially, and it was going nowhere fast, it was going nowhere fast. And I would be in my office, and just at the moment that I was feeling really discouraged, wondering if I really heard from God, my phone would ring. And Joe Serban, some of you know Joe Serban, would be on the other end. Here's a pastor of a church of probably 800 at that time. And he took time out of his busy day to call me and say, I just wanted to see how you're doing. A phone call can speak volumes just because somebody knows you care. Encourage the downhearted. Give to the needy. Befriend the friendless. Jesus said to love the unlovely. What good is it if you love somebody that everybody loves? Love the people that nobody loves. You see, it costs something to care. I remember a time several years ago that my car was stuck in a snowbank. And some guy came along and helped me push the car out and then jumped right back in his car and took off without even waiting for a thank you. That act of kindness meant a lot. And how can we ever forget the kindness of those on 9/11 who took care of other people with no thought for themselves in New York City? If you're following along in your Bible, would you turn to 1 Thessalonians 5:14? Kindness is for everybody. Everybody. Kindness is for men. The measure of a man is his kindness, Proverbs 19:22 says. Kindness is for women. Proverbs 31:26 tells us, in her tongue is the law of kindness. And in 1 Thessalonians 5:14 and 15, Paul writes, and we urge you, brothers, warn those who are idle, encourage the timid, help the weak, be patient with everyone. Make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always try to be kind to each other and to everyone else. Kindness lasts. Kindness goes the second mile. Kindness goes out of its way to let others know it really cares. So with that in mind, let's look at a couple of the clearest examples we have of kindness in the Word. They're found in Luke chapter 8. Beginning with verse 40, in this passage we see Jesus showing kindness to two people who are entirely different from each other. One is a man, one is a woman. One is an outcast, poor and unknown. The other is rich and influential and the ruler of a synagogue. And yet Jesus treats them both with ultimate kindness. By the time this story occurred, Jesus had gained a great deal of fame and was at the pinnacle of his popularity. People were respecting him as a teacher and as a healer, as a miracle worker, and they were following him all over the place. He was constantly swarmed with people. wherever he went. There were times it was so much so that Jesus had to sneak away. He had to go off by himself to be alone, to get some rest and to pray. But despite the pressures of popularity, despite the crowds constantly pressing in on him, despite all the demands on his time, Jesus in his kindness stopped everything he was doing to help these two people to meet their needs. Cal Thomas once wrote, "Love talked about is easily ignored, but love demonstrated is irresistible." I like that. Jesus not only talked about love and kindness, he modeled it for us. First, Jesus paid attention to them and to their needs. Let's look at Luke 8:40. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, the ruler of a synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. Now, we're not told where Jesus was going. He was probably on his way to some open place where he could, teach and preach to the crowds. Remember all those crowds who were just about to crush him. And then Jairus comes along. And it would seem that Jesus suddenly changed his direction at a moment's notice. He turned around. He was on his way to do something. It was important that he teach the people. But it was more important that he meet the need of this synagogue ruler and his young daughter. Much more important than what he had scheduled. Which raises the question, how well do you handle interruption? I mean, some people work best when they can concentrate on one thing at a time and see it through to completion. Most of us aren't very good multitaskers. I'm not. Give you an example. Last night we were kind of cleaning up some things that had been left undone, and I said, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if we made the coffee and then it would all be ready for the morning and all we had to do is plug it in? And everybody said, yeah, that's a great idea. So I walked into the kitchen and I opened the refrigerator to pull out the coffee. And I noticed that there was no Coke or root beer or water in there to get cold. So I stopped and I put the Coke and the root beer and the water into the refrigerator and I closed the door and walked away. It doesn't take much to distract me. But remember, I've had brain surgery. That's right, 4 times. 3 times. Anyway, most of us don't do 2 or 3 things very well at the same time. So if we're concentrating and somebody comes along and interrupts us, we count that as an intrusion. We don't normally handle it very well. But as you get older and more mature in the Lord, you begin to learn that sometimes that interruption is an opportunity. That God brought that interruption along to give you an opportunity to minister to someone that would have been lost otherwise. So if you aren't flexible enough to change, if you don't allow yourself to get interrupted from your project, whatever it happens to be, you'll miss some great opportunities that God may place before you. Jesus paid attention to Jairus. He changed his plans. He changed his direction. But Jairus wasn't the only interruption. However, Jesus was flexible and kind enough to stop and meet another need as they were on their way to the synagogue ruler's house. Take a look at verse 43. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him, Jesus, and touched the edge of his cloak. That's a mistranslation, by the way.